and then we will now start with the BOF about practical provenance in astronomy.
Okay, so we said well, thank you for having this discussion on provenance, and we wrote it to be a practical provenance discussion. We want it to be a discussion. So there will be this introduction and then a few topics that we prepared. You have the chat on Discord that we will follow. And you have this link on Discord for a small questionnaire about your usage of provenance, if you use it, if you use a data model, and what topics related to provenance would be interesting to you to be discussed today. What else? Do I forget something? We have links also. We could put the links of the slides. I could put this on Discord as well. Okay. And I hope we can also follow participants if they raise their hands. Like this. So provenance in astronomy. This is a topic that was really discussed intensely at the IVOA, the Virtual Observatory, to actually provide a standard to structure the provenance in astronomy. And in this context, the astronomy context, for data generation, it becomes more and more dense. You have a large consortium, maybe creating a large observatory, here CTA, but I'm thinking about SKA, KM3net, all those large telescopes that are being built now. And they are operated at some distance. There is the data acquisition part. All this data is then moved to some other country, to several data centers. Data centers do data processing, reduction, reconstruction, simulations, and archive some science data that will be disseminated, maybe through a web portal. That's kind of well used today. And the end user is here with a lot of information, a lot of data, but data product generation become obscure to the end user. So we have this need that appeared for structured and detailed provenance information. I put in bold structured and detailed because provenance information is something that generally you already think about, you already place in your file header or in some place in the logs, you keep some information about what happens. But we want it to be structured and detailed. We have this context also of the FAIR principle. In general, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This is also connected to the BOF we had on reproducibility, of course, but reusable is something a bit different. Just to have those FAIR principles well, clear for all, I put it in the slides. And I also put some colors just to make it clear that it's about metadata. Findable means well, having this kind of identifier that is indexed, registered somewhere. Accessible is a lot about standard protocols and also metadata. Interoperable, it's also about some standards, and the virtual observatory is really helping in all those FAIR principles. But languages, vocabularies, qualified references, this makes also things interoperable. Now, reusable is here where we see other words like accurate, relevant, and provenance. And this is more about trust. The findable, accessible, interoperable may be more technical, more description, but reusable, it's about the user will trust your data. So there was a discussion for the reproducibility and the 5 R that are rerun some data. You can run it again. You can reuse it. Reusable. You can reproduce a result somewhere, or you can replicate a result. All this is slightly different here. We are concerned about reusable. So we'll trust this data, we'll trust this thing, and we can reuse it. But reproducible means a bit more. It means really I can do the steps one by one and reproduce the result. It's just to clarify, has to be clear. So here is the link to the provenance data model standard. And this is about provenance of something. So what is provenance of something? Also, I collect here a lot of words, the vocabulary that is associated to provenance. Provenance of a thing, it means the history of this thing. It means that we are tracing this thing. It's a synonym of a chain of custody. And when we are thinking chain of custody, this thing was at some place and moved to another place. And also there is the question of ownership of this thing. So here provenance, yes, it is the origin. Where does it come from? But we have to insist that it's not only the origin, but the path, what has been done during the origin to what it is now. And this, knowing the path for the food you have in supermarket, for a piece of art that you pay a large amount of money, you want to know if it's the real origin and what happened to it. This gives confidence. So how do we do this? Tracing of the provenance. First, well, it's about plugging entities. So we are now talking about entities. For us, it's an image, a light curve, a table, a new file. It's also a telescope. It's also some tools that we can have. An entity is used to produce some other entity that is derived from this entity. That's the simplest link we could have, that is provenance. But we want to be a bit more detailed about what happens. So an activity also happens. Maybe we process a file to generate another file. We use some entity to generate some other entity. And the activity could be acquisition of data. It could be publication of some result. Activity can be linked together. This is more the workflow point of view. And entity can be linked together. This is more the data flow point of view. And to this, we add the association to an agent, or the attribution of an entity to an agent that is responsible for this activity or this entity. Having all those concepts, what is clearly, well, we know what's an activity in astronomy, we know what's an entity in astronomy, agent, we have an idea that it may be someone, a group of people. But what is important here is that they are all related with some specific relations. The relations makes the provenance. So all this, in fact, is the base of the W3C provenance definition and the standards, where any provenance is an information about entities, activities, and people, those agents, involved in producing a piece of data or thing, which can be used to form assessments about its quality, reliability, trustworthiness. Okay, this is more about the definitions. Now we apply this in the context of astronomy, and the data model provided by the IVOA adds descriptions. So we are describing in more details what are the activities, what they will do. It adds configuration, so how are they are tuned to be executed. And they are plugged in with VO concepts like unified content descriptor units, VO units, VO table, also the protocols we use in the VO that are table access protocol or simple access protocols. And for serializations, also the VO has some already known technologies. So to summarize, why recording structured provenance? Because, well, first, it is said in the FAIR principle, and more projects have to apply those principles, but there is a good reason for applying it. What they say is that you need rich metadata and detailed provenance. This ensures the quality, reliability, trustworthiness of the product. You have this reproducibility requirement that is often found in projects. This means to be able to rerun each activity, but maybe testing at each step and improving each step. This is generally what people want to do with a pipeline that records the provenance. It's not necessary now having the provenance to keep every intermediate files, if it's easy reproducible. So if you think about this, you can replace a large amount of data to only the provenance of this data. You can then trust the end product, and you can maybe rerun the activities if needed. So there is possible gain on disk, and this means a possible gain on costs for a project. Debugging is also an interesting topic. It's not necessary to restart from scratch, but you have the flow of what happened, and you locate in the provenance where are the faulty parts and how products can be discarded. What is a bit what we have to observe is that we often realize too late that there are missing elements or links in the provenance. This is why the capture of the provenance should be as detailed as possible and as naive as possible. You simply record what happens. A few examples now. So I take this example that I've presented at the IVOA in Paris, but also the last IVOA that was virtual, where we did this exercise to estimate the carbon footprint of the travels of all the participants, and there was 132 participants in Paris. And you see here graphs of the provenance of the calculation of those 155 tons of CO2 consumed by traveling to the IVOA meeting. So in the provenance, I have two views of this provenance, a graph with entities and activities, and here a Sankey view, where you have, in fact, the entities here and the activities here and the entities. So you have links to the calculators that I used that are provided by some agent. The train and flight calculators are different. Well, the flow of the actions that have been done to actually provide a total CO2 and also a comparison that we should be producing 1 ton of CO2 per person per year. So 132 participants, 155 tons of CO2. So I try to prove and to make this result really reliable. Now you have another estimate below where I don't give the provenance, but I give a link. Okay, I've seen this somewhere, and you don't have the provenance. Maybe you are asking why this 1,500 hour person. How did you estimate that exactly? Well, I can tell you I did my best, but you will have to trust me. So in this kind, you don't have the full provenance. You probably have more questions on the calculation that have been done. So this view, the provenance graph that we have, is very important, and this makes really provenance practical. So it's a chain of activities here that occurred in the past. You note that it's a past tense because we don't look at what will happen. We are just recording what happened. So using the core model, we already reached some goals: unique identifiers for all those blocks, traceability, the links between those blocks, some contact and acknowledgement. By using the full IVOA data model, we have a bit more of information about the activity that happened here, how it was tuned, and what kind of content we have in this. This is what I show in this graph. So a zoom on activity 2. You see that there is an activity description that says, oh, this job adds a line to a text file. Okay, I know what it does. It takes a text as an input and some some case, lower case here, that is added to this output text and placed in this output text too. So I have this larger view where you simply, by seeing at the graph, you know what happened. And you can maybe find the faulty part in there. So now we have this model, we try to apply it to different use cases. And we observe that there are different contexts, 2 flavors in general. We are calling provenance on top, what the project that already have the data product, they already exist, and you try to extract from those data products some metadata that is connected to provenance, and you restore the links between what happens and the thing that happens. And what we are developing is provenance inside, where really it's the pipeline itself that produces the provenance information. And this is supposed to be much more detailed without missing the steps. So important concepts are identifiers, unique, without meanings if possible. Granularity, I show it here on the side. Do you want to explain every single steps, or do you have groups of steps that makes a stage, something that is sufficient to understand what happened? And the level of detail, so I show it in this diagram. Do you really have to explain everything that was used, or do you focus on some, the main thing, the major thing? So there is some minimum provenance information that can be collected that will be useful. We have different steps in provenance management: capture, store, access, and visualize it. And well, this led us to define some terminology. We already have this workshop in September within the ESCAPE project. And this discussion here is an extension of this workshop, where we had to define what is a full provenance. The graphs that I've shown is something that we called provenance, but we should call it a full provenance. It's not hosted inside the entity. It should be aside in some database on the server or a separate file. And it contains all the links, all the tree, really. But generally, we have some provenance attached to an entity. So we had the concept of some minimum provenance information for an entity that would be related to just the last activity that happened and the context for it. There is also a lot of information that people call provenance in their products. And this is key information that is attached to a product to use to analyze this entity. It may be found in the graph in the full provenance, but here it is just used as well, key information for this product. So we had the idea to maybe call it specific provenance, specific metadata, maybe related to provenance in some way, but this is also a topic to be discussed. And I finish with the 6th topic that we have been placed in the questionnaire of well, some topics that would help to make provenance practical. This minimum provenance information, serializing provenance to really manipulate some files that are exchanging this provenance information. The linguist workflows is also something that is important, and people want to see it. Provenance then on top or inside. This is a bit more specific, but on top, how do you map this specific provenance or kind of provenance that is in files, and how do you reproduce a graph out of it, and how you introduce maybe capture in a pipeline to store directly the provenance inside. So provenance storage, structured database, provenance exploration, access this database and visualize the graph is something also that makes provenance practical. So I went through all those concepts and main questions. I wanted now to have a look at the questionnaire that has been sent. And then we will we'll start with the main topics that has been voted here. If there are no questions up to now. Okay. So I should have the results here. I hope you see it.
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
And I reload it. Hopefully, or maybe there are more answers to it. So first question was, are you provider or user of this provenance information? Well, if you are responsible of pipeline, you tend to see differently the provenance than if you want to find some provenance information as a user. But I see that at the EDAS, we are probably more providers of data. It is interesting to see that you include already, you attach provenance information to the data you create. It would be interesting to know what kind of provenance, having this definitions that I explained before. And I see that the people who answer actually know about the IVOA provenance data model, and it is derived from the W3C. So if you are using one, you're probably using also W3C. No, this is something we have found also during the ESCAPE workshop, is that it's interesting to have traceability, reliability, quality. Acknowledgements doesn't seem, and contact information doesn't seem to be the main most important point in recording the provenance. I assume that you already have some way to attach a product to some agent or some person that is responsible for it, or you have a help desk that may answer it. And then the part that seems very interesting also to people is this reproducibility. Now about different steps in provenance management, I see that, well, capture is, well, it's equal. And about the topics, yeah, I've seen this coming, that there are more people interested in the serialization, defining this minimum provenance information that would be inside a file. So maybe a header, fits header, HDF5 header. And maybe secondary topics are this go really inside, inside database storage, inside the data access. I propose we start with the minimum provenance information, maybe. Maybe as an illustration, I think I have this example. It actually comes from discussions at the EDAS in College Park with the CTA team, who wanted to place in the header of every data product, intermediate and final data product, some key information about the activity that created it and some context. So a contact, but also some context in the process. It's an observatory, so it's connected to an instrument that was used for the various activity. So do people have, well, an idea of what could be this minimum provenance information inside an entity, inside a data product, or do you have questions in general on how to make provenance more practical? maybe it was too dense. Do you generally use a unique identifier like this random number? I will let comments appear, but we were thinking, and it was a topic discussed over the year, that you have seen provenance is a graph. It's a complex structure. Maybe we would like something like OBSCOR in IVOA, that is a flat table. And this flat table would provide, well, this some key information on provenance of a product. So François, Mireille, do you have something
there is
to
one
complete this topic on minimum provenance?
There is one question from Rosa Diaz. Do you expect for the configuration dependencies be in the code itself?
Well, it would be interesting to know what you call configuration. So maybe I'll try to find you and could you actually explain at the microphone a bit more your questions about configuration? What is configuration for you of an activity?
I mean, the dependencies that you have in different code that you are using for your software, if it is not just isolated, but it might depend on other code.
Yeah, so I would see it as the software used and the environment for this software, maybe?
Yeah, the environment, or if your code, for example, we have seen or talk about not trying to reinvent the wheel, but then just build over other type of software. So how do you capture all those things?
So I think this would fall in the activity description, in fact, of an activity is built on yeah. It's too dense here. So in this activity, you will have a relation to an activity description that explains, well, this activity description is this code on GitHub with a version of the code. And this code has dependencies. Is this what you were thinking about?
Yeah.
So well, right now, the activity description is very general. It's a text description and a doc URL that could be the more information on the code used, if it's a code, if it's a software. So, well, this would be a specific activity description, I think. Generally, if I look at well, this minimum provenance information, see that we were thinking about some software with the name of the software and a version, and well, maybe some URL where you can find the software would be interesting to have.
Yes, about this, Marco, what do you mean by ID? Is the Matthew's answer okay for you? Or we will have URLs to software descriptions and things like that. But do you really mean an OID, for example?
No, I was thinking more. Can you hear me, by the way, because I'm not sure?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I was thinking about the ASCL and the data description, so an identifier for the software in that sense. Did I kill you? No, it's just...
we are still here.
I mean, the documentation URL for the software and pipeline can be fine. It is just that simply giving the name as a string and the version as a string, it makes it quite difficult for people to get to the exact software. That's it.
So this identifier, would it be related to the version?
Yeah.
If a version, if a version on GitHub had this this tag of the last commit,
sure, but then
you probably have a fine definition of the code used.
Yeah, okay. So the URL plus the version in the case of a Git repository is fine because it identifies it.
Yeah, what we have here for CTA pipes, it's the development version with the Git identifier at the end.
Yeah, the hash of the commit. Yeah, okay. No, it was just a...
Well, that would be minimum. Yeah, you probably want to know more about this code and can you really trust it, and was it fully tested?
Yeah, I read on Zoom chat that Louis da Costa thought that Marco was talking about parameters associated to the code. I am not sure he was talking about that, but this is an interesting question anyway, Louis, because we have the capability to store parameters description and parameters values associated to activities. So basically parameters which are used to run the software. So this is available in one of our classes.
Yeah. If I look at the graph here, the concept in green is a parameter. And it's really in the model attached to an activity. So these parameters are specific to this activity. So we don't see it as an entity that is reused in that case. So having the exact code that was used and the exact input parameters that were used for this code, you have more information on the execution of this activity. So I wonder, there is not a large interest for acknowledgement and contact information, but it's maybe because there is always this this contact information in header. So here it is presented in the minimum provenance as one contact. So you see that the complexity is less; it's a flat table, but it means that you have one main contact only in that sense.
Mathieu?
Oui.
On the Zoom interface, Gilles proposes minimum provenance. So perhaps he can explain what is minimum provenance for him. Gilles, you can speak.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, you have the authorization to speak.
Yes, maybe it's another topic than softwares. I think about Vizier, and in Vizier, we have also workflow in which we create tables from other tables. We add other metadata. And in that case, when you talk about VO tables, the question was on these VO tables on which we could add maybe provenance. And the provenance, this is the original tables, the authors, the references, and some things like that. But it's another.
In your specific case, indeed, you are more concerned about the authors of the initial paper that comes as a special contact, one of the contact at least. So it wouldn't fit really well with the minimum provenance here, because in the minimum provenance, we see it more connected to the last activity, and the last activity is the CDS providing the Vizier catalog, I think.
Yes. Yes, we do that together. So it was your suggestion, and it's
yeah. But I try to place it in the minimum provenance, but it's you want more details.
I just discovered the configuration which could be used to add information about the provenance of Vizier catalogs. For example, to explain in the configuration why we paste when we add a computed column and so on. So it could be useful too.
Okay.
Gilles, I think you should point to your poster.
Oh yes.
You can
which is available somewhere else in the meeting page.
But maybe if there are not that many questions on the minimum provenance information, well, we see it at information on the activity, for sure, with an identifier that we imagine that this identifier can help to query a more detailed system where you will have the full graph of provenance information. But here it's the identifier of the last activity, some attribute for this activity, a contact information. For CTA, we had the idea of a main process in general. Are we doing simulation? Are we doing observation? Are we doing calibration? This kind of process, but it's more internal to CTA. It's related to an instrument. So an instrument, well, here it's a simulation. So we simulate the instrument, but it would be a site of the CTA telescope. And also it would have a version of the array if it is upgraded. But also, well, more important maybe is the product identifier itself. Very important to have some serial number for it. Well, some creation time, but here it's a data product description for CTA, where we have more category level, the data model that structured the files internally, and some description that is data level 1 data product in HDF5. So this is all quite basic information, but it helps to well, take this product, know where it comes from, and if you want more information, then query more information on a server. So maybe we will move on to serializations. It seems to be a highly voted topic also. And well, I was thinking about Vizier, of course, but should we present the different serialization we have, or do the audience have some knowledge of how to serialize provenance? Yeah. If not, I can quickly show you what's behind a graph.
Michel has one.
Yeah, he's got one serialization, personal serialization. So I can come to this graph, and it's here. Yeah. Okay. And this graph, in fact, is using a W3C data format that can be written in JSON or XML. So we have, by using the W3C core concepts, we have direct access to the W3C serialization. However, well, it's based on W3C, so you have the prefix issues, but the structure of the file is that you have all the activities in one block named activity. So here I have my 3 activities, activity 1, activity 2. Then you have the entities that are used, so with the dictionary of entities with the entity identifier. So 3 entities here. I have the agents. And having all this, I also have blocks for the links, the relations between here activity and some information. So the influence or the used relation. This activity with this serial number used this entity as an input. So you have all this information, but what you don't really see the graph by looking at this this serialization. In XML, it's even you have even more information, and it's each activity has this VOPROV activity block tag. So you would have several. Well, the agents are defined, and also the relations are defined separately. So there is a block for each association. So it's very hard to see the graph by reading the file. Starting with this, is this kind of serialization useful for us? Would you use it as a data provider? Would you provide some JSON files like this? Or could we think of a more practical serialization?
Perhaps Laurent Michel would like to add something.
No, just to mention my own serialization. My problem was to embed into FITS files the provenance of the FITS file itself in order to run rerun the pipeline producing those files. And this is based on a JSON serialization with a minimal, as I might say, minimal keywords, but it's for my own purpose. It's not dedicated to be exported to other frameworks. And the idea is just to put a JSON string within an ASCII FITS table. This has been shown at the last ADAS.
What I see here that it's not really practical for you to use the W3C serialization.
Not at all. Yeah.
You kind of have to write it in your structure in the way you will consume it.
Yeah.
And so we have seen it for also Vizier. So Gilles, I have your examples of serialization here that we have discussed already all together. Maybe you have some comments on this. Still authorized to speak.
Yes, this is a rich VO table. This is not really a VO table output, but this is something which could be added in a VO table. This is based on the VODML, so the VO data model language. So this is a rich output in which it is possible to create the data model with the data that we provide. In this example, we begin to explain the different agents. After there is the entity in Vizier, this is the most important blocks with the catalogs. The entity is the catalogs, which is generated with the data, which was attributed to an agent, which is a CDS, and generated by, I don't remember, yes, generated by an activity, a CDS activity, and this activity used other entities like the article, which is below.
Yes, so was generated by an activity here.
And after
this activity
there is
will use
entity, which is the article.
So we start to see that it is structured. You open the activity, and then inside the activity you have the used entity for it. For example, this article. So XML is very verbose, so you have a lot of details on the title of the article.
And generated by an author, an editor, and so on. So
that was attributed. So we see that we go down in more details as we explore the file. So, well, we have those two categories of serialization where W3C is more flat by category, by classes of object. And I will complete your VO DML XML view by this example also that we have started to build together also. The idea here was to make it a bit more readable and also machine readable. So, well, I took the agent as it is in the XML part here. The agent are first defined. Then for entities, you have entities, but they are also attributed to agents inside this entity. So it's in fact the same structure as the VODML, but maybe more human readable for now. And each entity has some information on it. If there is someone and that is related to it, the author, the editor, see that the operator CDS also produced tables. And finally, we have the activities, and the activities would provide all the information on the tree, the graph. So by looking at the activity edition CDS, you have indeed what was used, but just the entity ID, the role and the entity ID, what it's generated, which is the CDS catalog, and the agent associated to it. So it's also a way to, well, make it readable, but also to jump. I want more information on this article, so I go to the entity block and I have more information on the article. And it's a bit structured. It's not this minimum provenance flat table that we have, but we have condensed in a file this provenance information. So this is absolutely not standard, but the only standard here is the prov W3C prov serialization that I've shown before. So the question maybe, would you be interested in having this kind of serialization using VO concepts behind and structured to be more well, more user-oriented, so readable by the user, but also readable by the machine.
There is a question from Mattia Mancini. Mattia, if you want to speak.
Yeah, so the question is, okay, but from this provenance serialized graph that you showed us, is it possible to execute it like automatically and obtain the same results? Like, I don't know, a pipeline description or something?
Maybe some others want to answer this also. But as I see it, it needs to be sufficiently detailed, and there is currently no standard way to reuse this provenance to execute again a pipeline. But if the pipeline stores itself the provenance, you may think about a module that will read the provenance again and regenerate the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come with the data model, but
Okay.
it comes with the usage of this data model, how you use it in practice. But we think that if it is sufficiently detailed and if it matches the structure of the code, yeah, of course you follow the steps automatically because it's machine readable. So it should be possible.
Because I was wondering, would it be an idea to augment, for instance, the CWN standard with the additional tag to include the provenance information, so like enrich that data model that is already present?
Yes.
Maybe I can explain my take on this question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is one part of the provenance description which deals with the description of the steps. So the algorithms, the software which was launched, and it stores all the parameters that each step has used. So if there is enough description in, like in the CWL language, on the activity descriptions, so typically a description of a workflow, then we can connect these activity descriptions stored in CWL files and read them again, check the corresponding parameters in the corresponding activities, and then launch again the same workflow. So this is where I think the provenance can help to realize the reproducibility of a workflow.
Okay, so it's like a back and forth translation between the provenance and the executable code.
And probably when you build the provenance inside, so when you are designing your pipeline, you can write these description files in CWL for each step of your workflow and store them as activity description. And when the pipeline is run, for each of these runs, you can store them into the provenance. And then there is compatibility with the workflow description and with the provenance, which is stored from the execution. I hope it's clear enough.
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you.
Thanks again.
I wonder also if, well, having CWL, the common workflow language description of a workflow, you can extract some information to this mapping with the provenance, but the file itself, the common workflow file, is itself an entity that is used to run the activities.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So it could also be seen that way. So we could put a well-defined place for this this file Finally,
Okay.
this file of the workflow is the context of the execution of the activity. So maybe I would also jump to this minimum provenance description. See that there is a process, well, the idea of a process. I just take this from the CTA pipeline developers, but maybe this process could be a workflow. I say that provenance is recorded without knowing what happens. That's when you record provenance, but of course you probably have some knowledge about what will happen or what is the line you want to follow. So well, knowing this workflow in the provenance is important. And we should give it a precise place, probably. So maybe we'll add this note here. The context of the generation of one entity is the activity that is inside a general workflow.
Can I ask you, what do you mean with a start time?
Start time of the activity? Is this?
Yeah, but for example, if you are, I was trying to relate it with release versions of a piece of software.
Oh, no, I have to make a distinction here that the software is an activity description. So you are describing the activity here, but the start time is the activity execution. So it's when it is actually run on some computer.
Yes, you may have hundreds, thousands of activities which are sharing the same software description because they are run with the same version of the software, for example. And they all will have a different start time, of course. And this has nothing to do with the release date of the software, which is part of the description.
So I wonder about the, it's a question for the participants, but it seems that many of you already include provenance information in the data they create, or they produce, or they provide. If you answered yes to this question, I provide provenance information. Could you explain to us what kind of provenance information you provided? Do you think you provided a graph, a detail of what happened, or just a few keywords? And are those keywords inside this minimum provenance, or are there other keywords? It would be interesting to hear your experience on this. Just a call.
I just have a comment about the graph and the serialization format. That in a way we want to find a format where we can store the provenance information in order to have tools so that this information is machine readable. So this is one goal, and at the same time, if we want to check what happened to one piece of data, we want to be able to understand with our human brain what happened to the data, and then we need this graph representation when it's not too difficult to show. So this is a trade-off we have to build, that we want something which is understandable typically a graph or a tree, where we can find the information very easily. And at the same time, we want to be able to search through long files explaining the different steps and typically the workflows. So this trade-off is maybe difficult to find.
Yeah.
That was just a comment.
I could try to show more complex graph.
Yeah, no, just a word. Many of you answered in the questionnaire that you were storing provenance information. So that would be nice to have some kind of storytelling of what you did and how you did that and what you call provenance.
There is a question from Gilles on the Zoom interface. Gilles, if you want to ask your question.
Yes, it was just about the provenance in the VO table in Vizier. In fact, there are no provenance today in the VO table, and the VO table represents about 70% of the queries in Vizier, so this is a lot. And there is not the information like the reference, like the authors, the dates, and so on. So this is a question. Are there people which are interested by an output, maybe in a provenance or in another method? I don't know. So this is a question today.
You can click on the +1 on this question to answer. If you want provenance in your Vizier VO table.
Yes, yes, you can send me a mail and please, please. Or not, I don't know. I think about the softwares and the API which consume VO table. And it was a remark of a documentalist in Vizier, which was surprised that the users, astronomers, consume data, but they don't read the README files because this is not with the VO tables. And in these README files, there are the information. So there is not the information in VO table. Maybe if you navigate in AstroQuery, in Topcat, or I don't know, you could have this information. Maybe not all the information, but the minimum. So it was a question of a documentalist at the beginning.
So it seems very important from what you say and what we gathered from others that you have this provenance inside the file. And in the case you show for Vizier, it seems that the flat table is not sufficient. So this makes really relevant, I think, those those formats that would go inside a VO table. It's more complex to think about a fits header in that way. Okay, so I'm showing here a graph that is some analysis of data. It's actually a gamma pi analysis of some simulated CTA data. So maybe you start to see the limit of having a graph visualization of the provenance, but still you may want something, a tool or so, that will help to explore the graph. So I see here that, okay, I have my fits file of flux points, which is in fact a spectrum. But you may want a tool to be able to click here and this identifier that can be stored inside the file. You have an identifier that points you to the activity that generated it, but you don't know a lot with this activity. It's actually writing the file, okay, not much. But by querying and clicking on where does this come from, you can rebuild the graph, and maybe well, move into the graph to check if each activity, well, was done in the way you wanted it to be. So here it's about some parameters that are here. It's about the dataset used. Well, if you go up like this, you may find relevant information, but this is another question. So where is the information that you need in this graph? So maybe it's a question also to those people who provide provenance information. Well, what do you expect your users to see? On one hand, you are providing a few keywords that is probably relevant information about this particular activity that that was defined with a very specific parameter. But you want also probably reproducibility, and reproducibility is having all this graph somewhere.
I want to, I mean, there is a lot of information in here trying to wrap my head about it. But for example, I can tell you some people that work with HST data, they always ask, have you changed something in the software that affects my data? What changed? They want to know the specifics of from one version to the other, for example, if their data is affected or things like that. I mean, this is, I guess, somewhat related.
It is related by, well, we have this use case that was expressed that says, hey, I have a problem with this pipeline version something or activity version something. I have to find all the data that was generated with this particular activity so that I can regenerate or send a warning to the people associated to this data.
I think this is something that you can achieve if you store your provenance information in a database, which you can query in order that you don't only know the provenance of a given data set or a given activity, but you can also discover entities by using provenance details. So reverse the thing if you want. And your use case is typically what you are achieving. So finding out everything which has been produced by a software version so and so is something you can achieve. Yes, we have something like that in our prototype at CDS, where we actually go from IPS built with HST images back to original data, calibrated data or drizzled images. And so from one drizzled image, for example, we can find out all the steps back to raw images. And so I think this can answer your questions. This is using something. I take the opportunity to say that this is using what we call ProvTap, which is actually storing the provenance information in a tab service by defining a tab schema. So there will be a dedicated session on this next week in the Interop. So the last developments in ProvTap. So I encourage you to come there if you are interested in access issues such as accessing provenance information in a database. Oh, I killed the discussion, actually.
Yes, I would like to add something about the graphs. Each entity or activity is related to a namespace. And if you click on an entity or on an attribute of the entity, you can have a description of this attribute. So it's interesting to understand what is this attribute and how we can understand it.
So the namespace in particular.
Yeah.
From what I've seen in the different graphs I've generated, well, sometimes you need this namespace to make the identifier really unique outside of your domain. But also it helps in here, for example, it helps to associate an activity description to some specific place. So here I have a job description language for activity 1, and this namespace, Opus JDL, will direct me to do the activity 1 description file, or should do it. Okay, it would propose me to download this VO table XML file. If I click on the, if I click on the activity, so this Opus job, with the activity 1 and serial number here, I will get the XML description of the activity, which is a UWS job here. So I get some information. And also, if I click on an entity, it is actually stored in an Opus store with this identifier. So if I click on it, I actually download the entity. So now, well, it's I had to give a specific namespace for users also, so that well, I don't have access to this user information, but there is a web page for this user also on my system. So I had to play with different namespaces like this. Okay. So I don't see a lot of activity. I would maybe use the chat to know if there is an interest in having a serialization that is not W3C, that is more in this VODML or Vizier. I would say prefer a YAML or VODML serialization. I'll put this on the Discord link, and I would add a thumb if you want to have this kind of new serialization that is, well, structured and machine readable and compatible with VO, but also compatible with Provenance W3C and human readable, I think. That's a try. Behind this, we are thinking about standardizing the format of exchange of this provenance, and this is really about interoperability of the provenance.
Marco is answering your question, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
He says, too early on my side to answer, but I guess yes. So he would prefer YAML or VODML one. Maybe he wants to comment. Maybe not, because he says it's too early.
Well, we also have formats that come for free, so maybe we should just stick to this kind of format. Who would generate this kind of format?
I really think it's project dependent, and I have currently no exact use case to test. So it's a bit too early really for me to give an answer on this. I wonder if there are clients developed outside the projects like CTA or the ones that are providing all the information on provenance and that build up the provenance DM. If there are clients outside that make use of this provenance for some discovery use case or for some filtering or for investigation of the data sets, that would be nice to know. And those maybe have an answer to this question. And you shouldn't leave me the ability to unmute myself. It's risky.
Well, Marco, I think we are not overloaded with a lot of people speaking. So please, if you have something to say, you can go on.
Yeah, well, at least we believe that it's important to have the provenance concepts in mind. I've seen from the questionnaire that people are doing their best to introduce some provenance in the data they provide. Well, I hope what we have shown here can help in structuring this provenance information. We start to reach the end of the BOF, so I try to summarize that one possibility is to standardize the minimum provenance information, so we are all talking the same attributes, and this would facilitate exchange of provenance or exploration of the provenance in general. And from what we have seen, this serialization topic, we had clues that people tend not to use the W3C W3C serialization when they really take the provenance inside their project, at least for Vizier and Swarm, and for CTA also. So I tend to think it's important to discuss this this serialization format. Yeah. So I note, at least from the questionnaire, this interest in workflow. I'm seeing the Discord chat.
Yeah, I can read the Discord chat because we are now close to the end of the BOF, but the BOF is a little bit waking up. So Gilles says that for Vizier, I think we need something. I mean, the YAML VODML serialization, I think. If you want in the future, provide rich VO table to clarify consumers what is original data and what is added on original data.
And within Escape, we have seen other use cases where this kind of request seems to be important.
Rosa writes, I think it is important and you should start with something. What is important, Rosa?
I think it's...
What you are enforcing, you're trying to get people to do. I mean, the capture of the provenance is a very important thing. So you should start with a simplified model, probably, of what you want to do and build from there.
Yes, indeed. So we mainly focused on the 3 first topics. So I see also Matthias interested in this connection with common workflow language that is inside the provenance and used for reproducibility. And indeed, well, what practice would best support this use case? And well, I was saying that you need to know the context, and maybe this context should be structured in keywords that are easily, well, you know what keywords to use if you want it to be interoperable. And from this specific keywords, I have my workflow. I have my workflow in common workflow language. You would be able to reproduce any well-described project. What you said, Rosa, also was connected to the capture. And for the capture of provenance, actually the graph that I've shown here for gamma pi is not generated step by step, really by hand, but it's a project that we developed for gamma pi initially, try to capture automatically the provenance of some specific functions in the project. So this package is called logprov, and it is really not really advanced in development, but working for at least for gamma pi and the use case we are trying to tackle. So we are trying to wrap Python functions, method, classes to actually send to the log structured provenance information. And then by reading this log and this structured information inside the log, we rebuild this graph here. So if you are interested, we will also put the link of this logprov package. Also, I'm advertising another development, which is the voprov Python package. And this is the package that helps to connect activity description and parameters to an activity. So following the IVOA data model and not just the W3C metadata model. Okay, I wanted to just have a look. Here, maybe some more answers that we just confirm what are the expectations in general of people for provenance. And I see that many people include provenance. So if you include this provenance, it is interesting to us who are trying to model this provenance to know what kind of information you have been putting in your data and what you call provenance. Okay. And then do we have the links to the GitHub pages for VioProv and LogProv, maybe? That could be helpful to have your feedback on those as well.
Sorry, maybe Michel can provide them on the Discord channel, because I don't have them myself. Okay, great. So to all the different panelists, what would be the best place to continue the discussion with the people that might reconsider what they want to do with provenance? If people want to discuss more during this week, for example.
So during this week, I think we can follow the channel.
Yes.
So we are happy to take your comments on the channel or privately.
So may I suggest then what you could do? You on the channel, that's good. And what you can do is form a group of friends. You have to make each other friends, and then you can do, if you want, a video conference or voice or whatever in a time slot when you have nothing else to do.
Okay. Oh, great.
Because you can do video inside of Discord as well. I've tried it once, but it was a one-on-one. But in Zoom, that will be too difficult during the day. Yeah. I also wanted to remind you that we are closing up soon.
Yeah.
We are anyway concluding, and I had a few links of some posters here that are connected to this provenance. Well, okay, I put it also here on the Discord channel. Please feel free. Yes. Okay. So we provided links on this channel in Discord. Also, the initial post. There is the questionnaire. You can continue to answer the questionnaire. There is a link to the workshop that we have been doing inside the Escape European project, which was really rich in the expression of use cases. And well, you can find many presentation and details on this workshop page. And I think we at least provided links on the channels that can be explored. Okay, I think we are good with the discussion today. So thanks for following this discussion. For us, it's being late, I think, and we are at the end of the conference day. So thanks to the panelists, thanks to the organizers, and well, we continue on the chat.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. And that closes the day. I don't have many public announcements. There's not many people left, but you probably heard there's going to be lightning talks tomorrow. Those are now in the agenda. And there's also a mysterious social event tomorrow after the last BOF. So basically at this time tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm sure Francesco will say more about that. And also, and you will see in the agenda, there is a virtual tour to the observatory.
Yes. So,
all right. Yeah, Francesco, go
yes,
ahead.
Just since you mentioned it. So it's good that there are not that many people because for the social event, I have no idea what we are going to do.
Oh, great.
So I really no idea. If somebody has ideas, that would be awesome. Otherwise, I was thinking of doing PowerPoint karaoke, where, you know, we just Google random words. I don't know, roof, brick, and we add slides to that. And we pick up the first slide deck that comes up in Google, and somebody has to give that presentation without knowing what it is. And,
so I wanted to suggest, why don't you ask people to volunteer to say something funny that they did regarding the pandemic? And then if somebody else did that, they can drink.
Yeah, we did that at another meeting. I like that idea. Now we do have a channel because we want to give Francesco some ideas to make his write-up even more funny.
Yes,
but I think this is a great idea. Francesco, you probably saw that, but there's lots of comments in that channel called Online Conference Experience.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Related to that is the pandemic experience, and I've got my own nasty stories.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's cool. The other thing we are going to do, we are going to have a watching marathon for the poster MP4s. So some poster authors have uploaded a total of 1.5 hours of video. They're like 2-3 minute video each, but there are quite a number. And so Simon Torres agreed to just stream them from his laptop. That's it. I mean, it's just as simple as that. It's also in the schedule. It will be at 14:30 UTC after the second BOF tomorrow. Of course, you know, all the videos are available on the website if people want to put them in the background. And if they hear something interesting, they can check out that poster later on. I don't know, things we're trying. But apart from that, virtual visit to Calaralto Observatory tomorrow, and also this lightning talks. And I like this pandemic themed social event. I think we should all be wearing our face masks and drink.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Apart from that, nothing else.
All right. See you in 9+ hours.
That's right.
This time I cannot oversleep. I overslept this morning.
It's okay. It's all right. See you tomorrow, folks.
Yes, we will.
Or tonight, depending on where you are.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye to you.